The former vice president's face turned ashen white as Karoline Leavitt pulled out the congressional records. Mike Pence, who just called her too young and inexperienced for serious politics, was about to learn why you never attack someone who's done their homework. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest political showdowns. The Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando was supposed to be Mike Pence's comeback moment, February 2025, and the former vice president was trying to rebuild his political brand after years in the wilderness. The Trump supporters who once chanted "Hang Mike Pence" had moved on to new enemies, and Pence hoped to reclaim his place in the conservative movement. But standing in his way, quite literally, was Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary who'd become the face of Trump's resurgent administration. The scheduling conflict wasn't accidental. CPAC organizers had deliberately programmed them back-to-back, knowing the tension would draw viewers. Pence arrived at the Rosen Shingle Creek Resort with a modest entourage, a far cry from his vice presidential days. His speech was carefully crafted to thread the needle, conservative enough to appeal to the base, but distanced enough from Trump to maintain his principled conservative brand. In the green room, his advisor Mark Short briefed him one last time. "Remember, Governor, stay above the fray. Don't attack Trump directly. Focus on your experience, your steady hand." "What about Leavitt?" Pence asked. "She's speaking right after me." Short waved dismissively. "She's 27, Mike, a communications major who got lucky. You were vice president of the United States. There's no comparison." It was the first of many miscalculations that day. Down the hall, Karoline Leavitt sat alone in a smaller green room, her routine unchanged from her CNN triumph over AOC. No entourage, no makeup team, just her leather portfolio and focused preparation. She'd spent the previous evening researching something specific: Mike Pence's early political career. Her phone buzzed with a text from President Trump. "Heard Pence is going to attack your age. Destroy him, but do it with class. Show them why. I chose you." Leavitt smiled. She'd anticipated this moment since the schedule was announced. Pence, like so many older politicians, would likely use her age as a weapon. They always did. What they never expected was for her to know their history better than they did. At 2 p.m., Pence took the stage to polite applause. The CPAC crowd, once his people, now treated him like a relic from another era. He delivered his prepared remarks competently: American values, conservative principles, the importance of experience in leadership. Then, during the Q&A portion, moderator Mercedes Schlapp asked the question that would change everything. "Mr. Vice President, what do you think about the Trump administration putting such young, inexperienced people in key positions, specifically Karoline Leavitt as press secretary?" Pence saw an opening to distinguish himself from Trump without direct confrontation. He adjusted his tie, put on his most paternal expression, and delivered what he thought was a diplomatic answer. "Mercedes, I have great respect for young people entering politics, but there's a difference between entry-level participation and holding one of the most important positions in government. When I served as vice president, our press secretary was a seasoned professional with decades of experience." He paused, warming to his theme. "Ms. Leavitt is, 27 years old. When I was 27, I was still learning the basics of political life, not speaking for the leader of the free world. There's simply no substitute for experience, for the wisdom that comes with age and years of public service." The audience response was mixed. Some older attendees nodded approvingly, but the younger conservatives, Trump's new base, shifted uncomfortably. Pence, misreading the room, continued, "I worry about the message it sends when we put someone barely out of college in such a crucial role. Press secretary isn't an entry-level job. It requires gravitas, experience, the kind of seasoning that only comes with time. Ms. Leavitt seems like a nice young woman, but she's simply too young and inexperienced for serious politics." He delivered the line with grandfatherly condescension, completely unaware he'd just walked into a trap 5 decades in the making. Backstage, Leavitt watched on the monitor, taking notes. She'd hoped Pence would go there, but hadn't been certain. Now he'd not only attacked her age, but done so with specific numbers and patronizing language. Perfect. As Pence concluded his remarks to tepid applause, Leavitt prepared to take the stage. They passed in the wings, Pence offering a patronizing smile and a good luck. Young lady that dripped with condescension. Leavitt took the stage to thunderous applause. Trump's base recognized her as one of their champions, the young warrior, who destroyed AOC and defended their president with facts and fire. "Thank you, CPAC," she began, her energy immediately different from Pence's studied calm. "It's an honor to be here, especially following Vice President Pence, whom I've always respected for his long career in politics." The emphasis on long got some chuckles. She was just getting started. Mercedes Schlapp, sensing drama, went straight for it. "Karoline, did you hear the Vice President's comments about your age and experience?" Leavitt smiled. "I did, Mercedes. And you know what? He's right about one thing. I am 27 years old. But since Mr. Pence brought up age and experience, I thought the audience might enjoy a little history lesson." She pulled out a folder from her portfolio, her signature move that viewers recognized from the AOC destruction. "Let's talk about age and political experience. At 27, I'm serving as White House press secretary, a job the vice president says requires decades of experience. But let's look at what Mike Pence was doing. At different ages, the audience leaned forward. Even Pence supporters sensed something coming. In 1988, Mike Pence ran for Congress. He was 29 years old, just 2 years older than I am now. He lost that race, running as someone with zero political experience, having never held any office. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many had forgotten Pence's failed early campaigns. But that's not the interesting part, Leavitt continued, pulling out a document. "This is from the Muncie Star Press, 1988. Would you like to hear what 29-year-old Mike Pence said about age and politics?" She didn't wait for an answer. Quote, "Youth brings energy and fresh ideas to politics. We shouldn't be bound by the old ways of thinking. My age is an asset, not a liability." The founding fathers were young men with young ideas. The crowd burst into laughter and applause. The hypocrisy was delicious. But wait, there's more. In 1990, Mr. Pence ran again. Lost again. He was 31, still with no political experience, still insisting youth was an advantage. It wasn't until his third try, at age 41, that he finally won a House seat. She looked directly at the camera, knowing Pence was watching backstage. "So let me get this straight. Mike Pence could run for Congress at 29 with zero experience. But I can't serve as press secretary at 27 with 5 years of communications experience." He could claim youth was an asset when it suited him, but now calls it a liability when it doesn't. The audience was fully engaged now, many recording on their phones. This was the kind of confrontation CPAC attendees lived for. "But let's talk about experience," Leavitt continued, her voice gaining strength. "Before becoming press secretary, I served as communications director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. I worked on successful presidential campaigns. I have a degree in communications and studied at the Georgetown Public Policy Institute." She pulled out another paper. Mike Pence's experience before his first run for Congress. He was a lawyer who'd never tried a case and a radio host who'd been fired twice. But somehow, he thought he was ready for Congress at 29. Backstage, Pence watched in horror. Mark Short tried to reassure him. "She's just grandstanding, Mike. This will blow over." But Pence knew better. He'd made a fundamental error, attacking someone without knowing they'd researched his past. Every word Leavitt spoke was true, pulled from public records and his own statements. Leavitt wasn't done. "The vice president mentioned our press secretary. When he was in office, that was Kayla McEnany. You know how old she was when she became press secretary? 32, just 5 years older than me. Was she too young, Mr. Vice President?" The trap was perfectly set. If Pence said yes, he'd insult McEnany, a CPAC favorite. If he said no, he'd admit his attack on Leavitt was hypocritical. Or let's go back further. Ron Ziegler, Nixon's press secretary, was 29 when appointed. D.D. Myers, Clinton's press secretary was 31. Were they all too young, or is it just me? She paused, letting the facts sink in before delivering the next blow. You know, what the real difference is between Mike Pence at 29 and me at 27. I've actually won something. I didn't need 3 tries to succeed. I didn't fail twice before figuring it out. When President Trump called, I was ready, and my record proves it. The audience erupted. Young conservatives especially loved seeing one of their own take down the older generation's condescension. But let's talk about judgment. Since the vice president implies age equals wisdom, at 29, Mike Pence ran campaign ads comparing himself to JFK and calling himself Indiana's John F. Kennedy. The ego required to compare yourself to JFK at 29 with no accomplishments. Now that's youthful inexperience. She held up the old campaign material. Pence's youthful face stared back. With Indiana's JFK in bold letters, the crowd laughed uproariously. At 27, I know better than to compare myself to historical figures. I let my work speak for itself. Maybe that's the real difference between us. Mercedes Schlapp, journalist instincts kicking in, asked, "Do you think age should matter in politics?" Leavitt's answer was masterful. Age is irrelevant. Competence matters. Preparation matters. Results matter. The vice president wants to make this about age because he can't make it about performance. While he's been giving paid speeches and writing books, I've been in the briefing room every day, serving the American people. She pulled out one final document. Speaking of books, let's read from Mike Pence's autobiography. Published last year. Chapter 3, page 47. I believe God called me to politics at a young age. Like David facing Goliath, youth can triumph over established power through faith and determination. The irony was excruciating. Pence had literally written about youth triumphing in politics, then attacked Leavitt for being young. Mr. Vice President, Leavitt addressed the camera directly. You were right about one thing in your book. Youth can triumph over established power. You're watching it happen right now. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Even Pence supporters couldn't deny she'd completely dismantled their man's argument using his own words and history. But Leavitt saved the best for last. You know what saddens me? Mike Pence was once the young conservative taking on the establishment. He ran as an outsider, a fresh voice. Now he's become exactly what he once fought against, an older politician telling young people they're not ready, despite having done the same thing at their age. She softened her tone, showing maturity beyond her years. I don't fault Mike Pence for running at 29. I applaud it. I just wish he'd remember that young man who believed age shouldn't be a barrier to service. That Mike Pence would support what I'm doing, not attack it. The psychological destruction was complete. She'd not only defeated his argument, but shown how he'd betrayed his younger self's principles. As she concluded, Leavitt delivered one final blow. The vice president said, when he was 27, he was still learning the basics of political life. Well, I've learned one basic lesson very well. Always do your homework before attacking someone, because they might have done theirs. She held up her folder, now clearly labeled Pence Congressional Runs 1988 to 2000 for the cameras to see. The preparation was evident, the execution flawless. The speech ended to thunderous applause. The contrast with Pence's tepid reception was stark. Young conservatives especially mobbed her afterward, seeing her as their champion against boomer condescension. Backstage, Pence was in crisis mode. His phone was buzzing non-stop. The clips were already viral. Leavitt destroys Pence with his own words dominated social media. The Indiana's JFK campaign poster became an instant meme. Mark Short tried damage control. We need to respond. Say she took things out of context. She didn't, Pence said quietly. Every word she said was true. I did run at 29. I did say those things about youth. I did compare myself to JFK. The worst part was the texts from former colleagues. Kayla McEnany's was particularly stinging. Thanks for implying I was too young for press secretary, Mike. Glad Karoline set the record straight. Even worse was the call from his old campaign manager from 1988. Mike, she found our old materials. She prepared better for this 5-minute response than you did for your entire speech. Maybe age isn't the advantage you think it is. On social media, the generational divide was evident. Older Republicans tried defending Pence, arguing he'd grown wiser with age. But younger conservatives rallied around Leavitt, sharing clips with captions like "This is our party now" and "Okay, boomer politics is dead." The most viral moment was Leavitt holding up the Indiana's JFK poster. Someone had already created a side-by-side comparison. Mike Pence at 29, "I'm the next JFK." Mike Pence at 65, "Young people aren't ready for politics." Trump himself weighed in on Truth Social. "Kayla was great, but Karoline is the best press secretary we've ever had." Mike Pence forgot his own history. "Not surprising when you attack my people. Especially brilliant young women like Karoline. You better come prepared." The political fallout was immediate. Pence's attempted comeback was dead on arrival. Political analysts noted he'd violated the cardinal rule of attacks: never criticize something you've done yourself. Pence's attack on Leavitt's age backfired spectacularly, wrote Ben Shapiro. She didn't just defend herself. She exposed him as a hypocrite using his own history. It's a masterclass in political combat. Even liberal outlets couldn't help but admire Leavitt's performance. "Whatever you think of her politics," wrote a Vox columnist, "Leavitt's demolition of Pence was brilliant. She did her homework and let facts destroy condescension." The next day, Pence tried to salvage the situation with a clarifying statement, claiming his words were misunderstood, but the damage was done. His own 1988 quotes about youth being an advantage were everywhere, paired with his attack on Leavitt. At the White House press briefing, Leavitt handled questions about the incident with characteristic professionalism. "I have great respect for Vice President Pence's service. I simply wanted to provide historical context when he questioned my qualifications, based solely on age." A reporter pressed, "Do you think he's a hypocrite?" "I think people can evolve in their views," she said diplomatically. "I just hope he remembers what it felt like to be young and ambitious, facing older politicians who said he wasn't ready." The incident became a defining moment in Republican politics. The old guard's attempt to dismiss Trump's young allies had failed spectacularly. Leavitt hadn't just defended herself. She'd shown that the new generation came armed with facts, preparation, and the ability to use opponents' histories against them. Political science professors immediately added the exchange to their curricula. "This is how you respond to ad hominem attacks," one Harvard professor told his class. Leavitt didn't get emotional or defensive. She used facts and Pence's own words to destroy his argument. It's surgical. For Pence, the humiliation was complete. His presidential ambitions, already on life support, flatlined completely. Who could take seriously a candidate who'd been so thoroughly exposed as a hypocrite by someone he'd dismissed? As to Young, the deeper irony wasn't lost on political observers. Pence had spent years cultivating an image of moral consistency, the principled conservative who stood for timeless values. But Leavitt had exposed him as just another politician who'd changed his tune when convenient. The most damaging part wasn't the age hypocrisy, wrote National Review's Jim Jarity. It was seeing Pence become everything he once opposed, an establishment figure using age and experience to gatekeep younger conservatives. Leavitt reminded everyone that Pence was once the young insurgent. Now he's the grumpy gatekeeper. For young conservatives, Leavitt became an icon. Her preparation, execution, and refusal to be intimidated by older politicians inspired a new generation. Be like Karoline became a motto, meaning do your homework, know your facts, and don't let anyone dismiss you for being young. The incident also changed how politicians approached age-based attacks. After watching Pence get eviscerated, few wanted to risk similar exposure. The too young criticism, once a reliable weapon against rising stars, became radioactive. Leavitt's folder from that day ended up in the Smithsonian's Political History collection, labeled "The Preparation That Killed a Political Career." It contained not just Pence's history, but anticipated counterarguments, historical precedents, and even backup statistics she never needed to use. "I over-prepared," she admitted in a later interview. "I had information going back to his college days. But that's the point. You can never be too prepared when someone attacks your qualifications. For Pence, the aftermath was a slow fade into irrelevance. His speaking fees plummeted. His book sales tanked. The man who'd been vice president of the United States became a cautionary tale about the dangers of hypocrisy in the social media age. The final indignity came at the next CPAC, where attendees wore T-shirts with Pence's Indiana's JFK poster and the caption "Too young at 29. It was cruel but effective, a permanent reminder of the day Mike Pence forgot his own history. In her memoir years later, Leavitt reflected on the encounter with characteristic grace. I didn't enjoy destroying Mike Pence's argument, but when someone questions your qualifications based on age alone, you have two choices: accept it or show them why they're wrong. I chose to show them. She added a lesson that resonated with young professionals everywhere. Never let anyone use your age against you. If you're qualified, you're qualified. And if someone says you're too young, ask them how old they were when they started. You might be surprised by the answer. The Pence-Leavitt confrontation became legendary in political circles, studied and dissected for years. But the lesson was simple. In modern politics, hypocrisy has a short half-life. Attack someone for something you've done yourself, and you'll face the consequences. For Karoline Leavitt, it was another victory in a career built on preparation and execution. For Mike Pence, it was the end of a political journey that began when he was just 2 years older than the woman who ended it. Age, as it turned out, really was just a number, but homework, that was forever.